Welcome back to Adventures in Python. This week we're looking at the if statement. Mastering these kinds of arguments and logic statements is key to programming, especially if we want to start to make and design games. Today's lesson really marks the start of our journey into creating games. Well, in fact, last week's challenge really marked that start. And I was so excited by this I had a go at the Guess My Number challenge, but more of that later. So let's get right into it. Here you can see an if statement. Before we go any further, let's look at what is needed to use the if keyword in Python. An if statement has to start with the if keyword, followed by a condition that ends in a colon. And then on the next line, indented 4 spaces, is the action needed to be taken if the condition is met, or as Python refers to the output, true. So let's look at this statement more closely. We are saying that if the variable colour equals the string yellow, then print the string bananas in the shell. Clearly this code will not work as I have not defined the variable colour. Also note there is no additional condition that Python is told to do should the outcome of the if test be false and not true. But in a gaming sense you can see how an if statement like this could work. For example, if the sprite has a golden gem, open the door. And if sprite does not have a golden gem, then the door does not open. So the if statement would be a condition of the door and not the sprite. More on this later, I'm sure. So let's look at an if statement that will work. Here you can see that I've created a variable called year and have given it a value. Now that the variable has been declared, we can create an if statement that can check against the condition. In this condition, year is greater than 2015, so Python will return a true value, and so will print the 2 string statements in the brackets in the Python shell. I think that it is timely to go back over the indents in Python. Python likes to organise blocks of code with indents, and the size of the indent is important. In effect, they help identify what blocks of code belong to each other, just like using brackets. The 2 print outputs here belong to the if statement and so are both indented by the same amount. Python uses 4 spaces per indent. If one of the print statements was 5 spaces indented and the other 4 spaces indented, Python would return an error, so keep a close eye on your indentations. In the previous slide you saw me use the greater than symbol by using the right pointing angle bracket on the keyboard. As I said earlier, the if statement requires a condition to check against to establish if the result is true and then take action accordingly. So let us have a look at the syntax of conditions in Python. The greater than, less than and the greater than or equal to statements should be self-explanatory and familiar to you. Take note, however, of the equal to and not equal to conditions. In an if statement, if you want to say equal to, you have to use 2 equal signs so that Python can distinguish between the equals of a variable and the equals to condition of an if statement. Note also that the not equal to condition is the exclamation mark and the equal sign. Just getting Python to check one condition is powerful. But what if the condition is not met? This is where the else keyword comes in. This allows you to create a true-false situation where Python will have to produce an outcome. Here you can see I've created a variable called year with the value of 2015, and the if statement has a condition of equal to 2016. So my year does not equal the if's condition, it is false. In earlier examples, nothing would be seen to happen. But now, by adding the else statement, Python is told what to do with all the other possible outcomes that are not 2016. In our case, Python will return the "what are you waiting for" string in the else condition. One last thing. Note how the else statement does not have a condition, but it does have a colon. The colon is very important. Do not forget to add it. The if statement is not just limited to one true outcome. It is possible to add as many supplemental if statements, or as I have done here, use the else if statement, which is written in Python as elif. Note how each elif statement has a condition to check and a colon, followed by an indented output or outputs. It is possible to put multiple outputs for each true condition. Note also how the else or false condition is also added, so that Python has to do something with this if statement, no matter what the outcome. In this example here, you can see that the output in the Python shell would be the second elif statement, and Python would print the living in the moment string. We can start to get really specific with our if statements by adding a second statement in the if statement by adding either the and, the or the not statements. Here you can see I have created a range of dates that will satisfy the true argument of the if statement by adding the and condition to the original if condition. So a true value will only be returned if the first condition and the second condition are both met. Here you can see I've been able to say that if the if variable falls between two values by using the greater than or equal to and the less than or equal to conditions, the value can be returned as true. All other values will be false, and so the else statement will be returned for all false values. My challenge to you all from lesson 4 was to use the skills learned in that lesson to create a guess my number game. To do this successfully, I predicted that you would have to use the if keyword, and to succeed you would have to do some research. The temptation to have a go myself proved too tempting, and so I had a go. This is my first attempt at cracking the problem. Without going into too much detail, it failed. I started off, as I always do, by being too ambitious. I wanted to create a window as a rudimentary game space, and you can see here that the str text input variable was not used later in the program. In short, I overstretched myself. Remember that simplicity is the key, so I decided to just focus on the problem, guess my number, and ensuring that the code worked. It meant running the game in the Python shell, as I originally said in the challenge, but perhaps I should listen to my own advice more often. Ignoring the mess I made of the code to build the game space, take a look at the logic of how I planned for the game to work. From the outset, I was keeping it simple with only one possible answer outcome. The answer variable was what was being checked for. My plan was for the if function to loop. If I guessed wrong, the else output allowed for me to enter another guess and the loop would start again. So I stripped my code down. Here is my stripped down code. The entire game works in Python shell. Again, keeping it simple at this stage, there is only one possible outcome, 3, and that is declared in the variable ans. The guess variable is the number input by the user. The program starts by asking the user to guess a number. The instructions in the string state the range to help the user. Once the user inputs their number, the if statement can run. Does the input match or equal the ans variable? If so, print well done. If not, try again. I thought my logic was sound and tried the program. It ran, but not as I expected it. The following screenshots are what happens when I knowingly put in a wrong number. What I had forgotten was that the if statement is a true-false condition, not a loop. Once the conditions for true or false have been met, the program stops. It does not loop. We will be moving on to loops in lesson 6, but I had the bit between my teeth now and I wanted to solve this. So I did some research myself and found the while argument. I do not want to show you all the iterations I had to go through to get to this block of code, but basically Python can now choose a random number and the while loop will allow the user to input their guesses as many times as they like to solve the problem. The ans variable used the range argument to set the number limit. By changing the numbers in the brackets, Python would have a larger range of numbers to select from. It selects a random number from the set range by using the randint argument. Take note here, the range of numbers in the range and randint brackets have to be the same. The myname variable allows me to personalize the game by getting the user to first input their name, and then Python inserts the user's own input into the input string, requesting them to guess a number. Take note again here, the input instruction string has to have the same number range as those in the range and randint arguments. The while condition dictates the loop. It says, keep checking answers until the variables of the ans and range are equal. The new addition to the code here, apart from the while function, is the break function, which tells Python to stop the loop when the answer is correct. So, on to this week's challenge. If you created something similar to me from the last challenge, well done. If you did not, never mind. Just keep practicing. Remember to keep it simple, and that seems to be my error, trying to do too much too early. Anyway, this week, before we launch into loops next time, I want you to use the code from the previous slide. YouTube will not allow me to paste the code into the video description, so you'll have to copy it carefully. Remember to indent equally and to remember the colons. Once you'd have copied it, can you modify the code so that the user only has a certain number of guesses available to them? I think that you might have to use a similar solution to the inward spiral solution from an earlier challenge. You might have to make an attempts variable too. If you get this to work, can you create a method of getting Python to feed back to the user that they only have 3 guesses left, 2 guesses left, 1 guess left, etc. Finally, for double prizes, can you adapt the Guess My Number game into a hangman game? I think that you'll need to get Python to choose a word from a stored string of words, and we've already covered strings. You will need to get Python to let the user know how many letters are in the word and allow the user to input individual letters. I will leave you to work out how Python shows the user correct guesses and places them in the appropriate place in the word. At this stage, I would use words that do not have double letters or repeated letters in the word. Thinking about this, I think that this is a big challenge for the week, so good luck. And until the next lesson, keep practicing!